my pleasure to introduce one of the most interesting and exciting engineering professors ever, Dr. Folarin. Dr. Folarin is an associate professor of biomedical engineering here at San Jose State University, where his research interests include focused on the biomedical applications of nanotechnology, including drug delivery, quantum dots, biocompatibility, graphene and silicon, and mobile imaging platforms. Prior to teaching at SJSU, he was a postdoctoral associate and a research assistant professor at the University of Buffalo's Institute for Lasers, Photonics, and Biophonetics, where he created multimodal imaging probes.
I think that's enough, Darius. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much. I'll be moderating this session. I just want to acknowledge Darius for all the hard work he's put into this, bringing it together. We've had a strong team working on this, and the students have been excited to see lots of SJSU alumni as part of the panel and professionals that are going to come give them knowledge, and they even had the opportunity to meet some of them in person. So that has been a wonderful experience. So I'm going to call on Takwa to very shortly to introduce our first speaker. But the overall format that we're going to go along is first, Deborah Turnage is going to speak. And she's our most senior person. She'll speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a brief Q&A. After that, we'll have Brian Spence, our senior program manager at LinkedIn. He'll speak for about 5 minutes, and then about a 5-minute will be Q&A of that. And then we'll have John Adams. He'll speak 5 minutes and 5-minute Q&A. And then we'll have Joan Cernema. She'll speak for 5 minutes and 5-minute Q&A. And then we'll have Khalil Estelle. He'll speak for 5 minutes, then a 5-minute kind of Q&A. And then Jonathan Dixon, he'll speak for 5 minutes and a 5-minute Q&A. And then Jalen Dinwiddie, he'll speak for 5 minutes and a 5-minute Q&A. If you have questions, please type the questions in the chat. You could either send it directly to the speaker, or you could send it to everyone, and they'll probably try to address it because they are going to have some downtime while other speakers are speaking, or we'll try to address it at the end. Takwa, are you ready?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Dr. Folarin. Thank you, Darius.
No problem.
Sorry about that. All right. So my name is Takwa Bajali. I'm a current SJSU grad student and exec member of BASE. BASE stands for Black Alliance of Scientists and Engineers at SJSU. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come join us in our second session, Black in STEM, of today's events, which is hosted by BASE, the J. Pinson STEM Center, and the Career Center as well. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of introducing our first panelist. Her name is Deborah Turnage. She is a UCPath System-Wide Reporting BI Manager at University of California Office of the President. She has an extensive background in leading teams and processes that are critical to creating quality-focused staff that are receptive to new ways of doing business and can adapt positively to changing business conditions. Her specialties are Six Sigma concepts and practical applications. If anyone's interested in Deborah Turnage's LinkedIn contact information, I'll post it in the chat box. So without further ado, Deborah Turnage, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And look, I'm really excited to be able to meet and talk to you all and see all of your beautiful faces, whether in motion or in picture. It's wonderful. And the first person I met and was introduced to was Darius through LinkedIn. So again, thank you for the invitation and thank you for the warm welcome. Really much appreciated. Excited to share with you my experiences and look forward to your questions. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the screen, let's see, I'm going to share, make sure you guys can see my.
Yeah, well, the screen is being shared. Darius will.
Oh, it is? Oh, great. Thank you, Darius. All right, then I won't have to worry about that. All right, so again, my name is Deborah, and as they mentioned, I manage business analysis, processes, and reporting for the University of California. And the area that I work in is with the Office of the President. And if you don't know, the Office of the President is kind of like the headquarters for the UC system. And so that's where the president of the university is based. And we manage what we call system-wide approaches for everything that we have to work with for the entire university system. Today, I'll be talking with you guys about data analysis and reporting at UC. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. All right, so I wanted to give you guys an idea of my current responsibilities and my purpose, right? So my role is, I kind of wear two hats right now. I am, my day job is a system-wide reporting manager, which basically means that I have a team that will support the 10 campuses, the 5 medical centers, and the 3 labs. And what we do is prepare reports from our system of record, and we're using a PeopleSoft system of record for our payroll and our HR. And so all of the locations and the campuses will input their information for managing their their book of business with their administrative components, whether it's the instructors or the HR folks, payroll folks. All of that information goes into one system. My team will work on compiling the output to present it in a way that the locations and various users can just run reports and see that information. We do that with a set of data analysts and reporting developers. You know, the reason why we do it is to help provide analytical insight for our users. Okay, so that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis. But I was also asked to take on the role of retiring our mainframe system. And so the University of California has run on kind of a legacy mainframe, which is an old legacy system that's about 35 years old. We wanted to move all of that payroll data into the cloud to allow for some agility, because you get into the mainframe and there's a lot of stuff it does do. It's very strong, it's very robust, but there are limitations because it just doesn't allow you to be agile or nimble. So we needed to really move that information into the cloud. That process was an exercise that took about 10 years to get us there into the cloud. And so now that we're finally there, we're ready to take about 25 applications and start to move them, and then again get all of our user base used to the notion of going into AWS as opposed to going into a mainframe COBOL environment. We recently brought on a new CIO, Van Williams from UC Santa Cruz. And just to kind of give you kind of the scope and scale of UC, I wanted to put in a quote that he had mentioned is, you know, we're a $40+ billion enterprise. We contribute about 82 billion annually to California's GDP. And we employ about 500,000 employees and educate about 280,000 students just in this year. So overall, we are probably the second largest payroll system for the state of California. Okay. Next slide. So how do I do what I do? You know, it's a challenge because there are different types of customers that I have to work with. And everybody's got an opinion, everybody's got an idea of how things should be done, how fast they want it, and the way they want it. So I kind of have to practice active listening. And by that, I mean, I really kind of have to listen to the things that aren't being said. You know, designing reports is kind of like it's more an art than you would think, you know, as far as, you know, it's going to be numbers, they need to add up, but there's also an activity to it for how that information needs to present to make it palatable for the people that are receiving it, make it easy to read, easy to understand. And so there's a whole kind of back and forth to be able to get to that. And what I found is that a lot of times people, and myself included, aren't really able to say specifically what you're looking for. You just kind of have a general idea. So you get analysts together to kind of pull that information out, and then developers will work with the analysts to build the information and then go back and forth. So it's a bit of a dance. but you got to work on active listening. You then also have to apply kind of a negotiation or a bargaining for the things that people may want. You may not be able to deliver it either in the time, or it doesn't fit with the package that they're asking for. So you kind of figure out a way to get to the answer, but maybe in a different way. And then sometimes it's something that either shouldn't be done or should be done. So you kind of have to use your power of persuasion to convince folks to think about things a little bit differently. But also, again, giving weight and credibility to the ask in the first place. And then ultimately, when some of that stuff gets to be a little bit frustrating, there's times when you got to vent a little bit, but I try and rely on my inside voice to vent more in my head, and then figure out a way to really go back to the table and maybe start with active listening again, and then continue through the negotiation and the persuasion. But really trying to make sure that we do reach a middle ground. And then the other thing I really rely on is making sure that I take nothing personal. A lot of times, these leaders or people who are looking for this information, they've got pressures on them. And sometimes they come to the table. I'm fond of saying things often come in hot. And so we have to figure out a way to work through those issues, but certainly by not taking anything personally, so that we can really find the nugget in the noise, right? Because all of that excess information, really around that, there's a bit that you really need to kind of get the job done. So again, I just kind of listen for the important key elements when people are coming at me. And then, a lot of times in my role as a manager, I'd love to be able to say that I can delegate and hand everything off and make everyone else responsible for it. But because I'm a little bit OCD and a type A, I kind of prepare to assume responsibility for key issues. I want to make sure that I fully understand what needs to happen. And then if I'm mentoring someone or working with someone that I need to delegate to, I know what needs to happen, and then I just either help them accomplish it, and also listening for their ideas about how we may be able to accomplish it. But definitely be prepared to kind of assume the issue if for some reason it starts to fall through. And then ultimately just remain curious. Always want to know the why and the how and the what when you're doing your work. That seems to help me kind of stay invigorated and motivated to do the things I need to do. Okay. So then why do we do it? So as I mentioned, we have a group of analysts and developers that are on my team, and we provide the data and the support for all of the locations that are engaged with us. So that gives us a kind of a centralized support model. And what that means is we have a group of folks, on my team, I've got about 10 people. We can build a report, negotiate what should go in that report that will satisfy all interested parties. And so you have one report that is usable by multiples, as opposed to each of the locations having to build and manage their own reports, because it's more costly for, like UC Merced, to stand up a team as opposed to relying on us, where UC Merced, UC San Francisco, they can contact us to run reports, as opposed to each one having their own group of individuals. So it's a bit of a cost savings when we have reports that can be managed. We have about 150 reports that all of the locations can sign in to use. It also allows us to develop that level of expertise. So that's all we do all day long. And so we're in the system, and we're also getting input from other locations to understand what needs to go into a single report. So we really kind of have a focused expertise to be able to provide the end product. And being able to do the analysis, again, based on multiple areas of input that we can build into the report. For the longer term, it's from the business intelligence, we want to be able to put that information in to make it easier for the analysis and the predictability. Over the long run, if we have a report that we can say, okay, over this period of time, this is what the data revealed for last fiscal year. Sometimes you can build in predictability based on the number of employees, the amount of dollars being paid, sick leave, all of that. You can build in some level of predictability for the managers and provide that level of analysis. So ultimately, we're trying to position ourselves to be able to provide that level of intelligence. And then the impacts, data is powerful. I mean, it's a currency in a lot of cases, and it answers the questions to many questions. And we definitely are key in helping to provide support for the decision-making process for all of our users, and when they run these reports and review them. And it allows us to be able to indicate for folks what's working and then what may not be working, because the trend might be going down and they don't know it until they have an opportunity to take a look at the reports. So what's next? So with going into AWS for a new environment, going into the cloud, we've got all of our locations now off the mainframe, as I mentioned earlier, and they're in the cloud. So we really are kind of changing our language, changing our ability to kind of look at the data, support all of the individuals that now are in this one space as far as their payroll and their HR information. So it's a lot of data, a lot of information that is going to need to make sure we got to have the space for it, because we've got to provide kind of that historical perspective over a period of time. I think our last location went into the cloud late last year, so it's still relatively new for the university to really kind of get ourselves positioned. So we're kind of moving through that exercise for being able to manage big data in the cloud now. Ultimately, we want to kind of build, business intelligence initiatives to really build more on the predictability that data can provide, and provide more depth of insight for our customers. And really, that's just taking all of that data and just doing number crunching for them. And ultimately, so right now we have the payroll and the HR information, but we also have our student data, we have retirement data, there's grants information as well. And so those are all individual systems that aren't yet connected to our payroll and our HR. So we've got more growth to go when we are able to get all of that data connected up in one place. That's going to really give us a lot more opportunity to really align that information and provide that level of continuity in the analysis that we do for our customer base. All right, and then this last slide, going with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and kind of just talking about that, what that means for me. And I know when I got into IT and technology years ago, it was always a bit stunning to me that I was really the only person of color in the room in a lot of cases. And it was baffling to me, because I never really felt like this was that complex, in the sense that if people were interested, they certainly could do it. You just had to have an interest in it. So at one point, I helped start the chapter of Black Data Processing Associates here. Because again, it just seemed to me that it's important to have our voices at the table, whether it's a person of color or female. It's data, you've got to bring people in to have those opinions about how data can be interpreted, because it's the number, but it's the story behind the numbers that help explain a lot. And if you don't have the right voices, you're not going to get the full picture. And so one of the things that I've done to try and help with that is whenever I need to hire someone to come on board, and in a lot of cases I'll work with an agency to bring people in as contractors, but I will always state that I'm looking for a diverse candidate pool. So I make that mandatory, and the UC also has made it mandatory that we as managers are looking at a diverse candidate pool to be able to give people the right type of opportunities. And the other thing we've implemented is now when you interview, you need to have someone of color on your interview panel, and making sure that it's gender balanced. So the university is doing a lot to try and help ensure that we've got that level of balance as we move through it. All right, I think that's the end of my slide. I feel like I may have gone kind of quickly, but any questions?
All right, we'll take, so Takwa is gonna, we actually have custom questions for each speaker, but Takwa is gonna go ahead and ask one question. So Takwa, please go ahead, ask your first question.
All right, thank you, Deborah, for the informative presentation. One question, well, I have two questions, but I'll just try to keep it with one. So which part of the data in the cloud is open sourced for the public to use?
So the data that I work with, because it's payroll and HR data, none of that is open to use. So I don't deal with open source data. As a matter of fact, we had a huge breach. You guys may or may not have heard about it, but it was the largest breach that we've had at UC, and that happened earlier this year, right around July, August. Our CIO really went through it for that. So all of the data that I deal with is not, but I will tell you the payroll, what we earn as UC employees, that's public information that's out there and searchable for anyone to see. It's part of our compliance component with the state of California. So that information is made public, but none of the stuff that I deal with is public. But we do have a lot of public information out there for UC. It's just not in under my umbrella.
All right, thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming here, especially being that you're from the UC system, and it's a very important system in California. So if you have any questions, please send them directly to Deborah while she's here. Next up, I'm going to introduce another student from CSU Long Beach, Daniel Tripp. Daniel Tripp is a master's student. He's doing his internship in San Francisco, and he's a fantastic contributor to these kind of events. He's helped organize Black Engineer Week, so we thought it'd be great to have him back. And Daniel is going to introduce Brian Spence. So Daniel, please go ahead.
Thank you. All right, introducing Brian Spence. So Brian Spence he has worked in several industries. He's worked in the insurance industry. He's worked in real estate. He's working in big tech. He spent a lot of time at Microsoft as actually the lead HBCU diversity recruiter. So really a champion of diversity. And he's exceeding hiring goals. So he must be placing a lot of people. He is now the senior program manager at LinkedIn, which is part of Microsoft, which is pretty sweet. He studied business administration and management at Elizabeth City State University. Got his master's in business at East Carolina University, and high achieving, very high GPA, I would say as well. We're excited to have him speaking with us today. Please welcome Brian Spence.
Daniel, thank you so much for that introduction. And you did a great job with parsing that LinkedIn profile. I love it. I love it. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Spence, and I am a senior program manager, as Daniel mentioned, here at LinkedIn. The title of my 5 minutes today is Exposure Expands Expectations. This is something that I say to all of my students, anyone that I meet, something that I believe, but I'm going to tell you more about it as I talk. So since 5 minutes goes really quickly, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide and just tell you more about who I am. All right, so as Daniel did mention, I did graduate from Elizabeth City State University, which is a historically Black college and university here in North Carolina, where I currently live with my wife and son. I have 6 years of management HR experience on the financial side, and then 4 years of tech recruiting and PM experience on the big tech side. So definitely a diversity, equity, inclusion advocate, and also a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, which is why you see that hashtag 1906 at the bottom. As you see on the top right there, it says, be sure about your destination, but be flexible with your journey. And as I think about being Black in tech, I think that's something that's important to remember. You know, you definitely want to be able to set goals. You definitely want to be able to have timelines with those goals, but you also have to have the mentality of being flexible and agile and knowing that, you know, you might have to be a little more lenient with that destination or with that journey really towards that destination. As it could curve, you might have an obstacle, a pause or something there. You never know what could come up, but that will not stop you from getting to where you want to be in tech or, you know, whatever else you decide to do. So as you see that middle picture there, that's one of the pictures I took from a booth, actually the Microsoft booth and at a NSBE conference back when we could go in person. You know, it says, who are you? And each of those buttons have individual verbs that really talk about like who a person could be, right? So I think it's important that you take a look and, internally and really think about who it is that you are and who it is that you want to be. So because exposure does expand those expectations. So what am I working on and why is it necessary? I know that we have a lot of engineers here on the panel, so I feel a little imposter syndrome here. However, because of the work that I've done, you know, I feel like definitely I have some value to add in terms of diversity, inclusion, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, but then as we call it here at LinkedIn, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. You know, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission states that less than 8% of employees in high tech are Black. That is what I'm working on. And that is also why it's necessary, right? We're looking to really diversify our overall workforce. As here at LinkedIn, diversity, inclusion, and belonging is our #1 priority in talent acquisition. And my work as a senior program manager is really to just strategize on the work that we do for this population, for minorities, and what I do directly affects the success of part of that acronym, if not all. So when I say that, what I'm really saying is that, you know, us in recruiting or in talent acquisition, we have a direct impact on the diversity that we make for a company. You know, we can bring in diverse hires. However, on the inclusion and belonging or the equity and inclusion piece, that's something that is for everyone, you know, whether you're in talent acquisition, whether you are an engineering leader, you know, whether you're, you know, an admin, that's something that takes everyone to do, because it's one thing to, you know, as the saying goes, you know, be invited to the party versus being, you know, invited to dance or being invited to actually lead, you know, that dance. So they are very, very distinct and different things. And that's why it's important for us all to have a focus on this. Now, if we go to the next slide, what I want to tell you about is what is the outcome and why does it matter? There is a quote, and I'm going to turn to the right here as I have my screen here, but Martin Luther King Jr. said in 1967 in one of his speeches, he said that Ralph Waldo Emerson said on one occasion that if a man can write a better book or preach a better sermon or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, even if he builds his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door. I think that is such a powerful quote that relates so much to this work right now and being Black in tech. You know, there are great things and the time is now. You know, there are tons of us employers, there are tons of people that are looking for, you know, minorities in tech and looking to really increase the opportunities for minorities, but also what that does for the company is allows products and services to really be created to reduce biases, allows products and services to be created that really and truly represents the actual customers and the target base. What I do in terms of the outcome of what I do directly is I bring in diverse talent, because my work allows me to be able to bring in talent, which then allows you to be your authentic self when you come to a company like LinkedIn or another company that is represented by the panelists here today. So we go to the next slide. Next steps. Another favorite quote of mine: it's not what you gather, but what you scatter that tells what kind of life you've lived. For me, something that I've kind of taken to heart along my career, it's not, you know, how many people I can find or, you know, what I do every single day that helps the company, but really the impact that I have and that I'm able to make. And what I do is, what I'm doing as my next step is continuing to tell the story. It's all about telling the story about why it's important to have a diverse workforce. It's about creating opportunities for exposure for minorities. It's about developing those skills and teaching others about how to claim that space, and then allowing others and kind of empowering them to each one teach one and then repeat. So, you know, once you get to that place of success, whatever that is defined by you, it's important that you then reach across, you know, to someone else to help someone else actually achieve their goals and their dreams as well. So if we move to the next slide, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to me? All of the things that I've spoken about. So I have this image here. And if you look at the very top of the image, you know, I know I have a lot of engineers here, so this is probably, you know, easy stuff that you all can do in your sleep. However, just from a visual, you know, you can't really tell what's at the top. You can kind of pinpoint some of that function or of that mathematical equation. But, you know, that's what a lot of people do for diversity. It's easy to find a diverse candidate. It's easy to find a diverse student. However, what they do is only take a piece of that puzzle, and the equity and inclusion is what means even more as it relates to actually belonging to a company and actually being able to be your authentic self and being able to take that mask off when you're at work. So, you know, for me, this equation really represents what diversity, equity, and inclusion means to me. It's something that can be very simple, but is also very complex. It's something that can, you know, look very clear, but also be a little blurry at times. So for me, it depends on, you know, what situation I'm in, or, you know, or what audience in terms of what this means. But for me, it just really equates to my passion. So diversity, equity, inclusion means passion for me. All right, now I have questions.
Thank you very much. Daniel will go ahead with the question.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for this question. So what kinds of professional development opportunities or events does LinkedIn offer for people of color and diverse employees?
Absolutely. LinkedIn has a multitude of learnings, of workshops. Just last week, we had some of our senior leaders, engineering leaders, host a Black and Latina Connect virtually. So we all got together and we talked about those issues and talked about professional development. One thing that we're doing globally, and I had a feeling I was going to get a question like this, but I'm going to put it in the chat here. But if you go to opportunity.linkedin.com, it's something that we are doing in partnership with Microsoft and GitHub with our LinkedIn Learning platform. And what that is really just an opportunity for others to be able to create learning platforms or learning journeys, if you will, for the actual roles that they're interested in. A part of this, we also have something that will take your LinkedIn profile, and you are able to put in the type of roles that you're interested in. And what it will do is it will generate a middle column. So one column has all the skills that are represented from your actual profile. And then the right column has all the skills that are represented in the jobs and the job requirements or postings that we're seeing on our platform. And in the middle, what that does is that highlights the things that you do have, but also highlights those gaps. And from that, we're able to create actually a learning journey on LinkedIn Learning that will allow you to really improve those skills. So that way, you know that you're ready for that next opportunity. So that's something that we are doing globally, you know, for people of color.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for what you're doing and being so fast with the links, like boom, boom. You know, you got them out. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
If you have any questions for Brian, remember, he's still here. You can send him a direct message. Next up, I'm going to introduce Skylar Dennis. Skylar Dennis is the Vice President of BASE, the Black Alliance of Sciences and Engineers. She's a chemistry major, and the Black Alliance of Sciences and Engineers tries to increase the number of Black engineers and scientists who excel academically, succeed professionally, and positively impact the community. And Skylar will go ahead to introduce John Adams. So Skylar, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Professor Eros. I would like to introduce John Adams, and an aircraft systems integration and test engineer at Lockheed Martin. Mr. Adams graduated with his Bachelor's of Science in Aeronautics, Aviation, Aerospace Science, and Technology. And congratulations are in order because he's currently completing his Master's in Business Administration at the University of California, Berkeley. You can now take the floor. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Skylar, and I appreciate the congratulations. It was a long road to get there, but good time so far. So first and foremost, good afternoon, everyone. It's going to be really tough to follow Brian there, but I hope I can get you all a little bit excited here about space. So thank you for the introduction. We can hop on to the next one, but I'll say my theme here is not hidden figures. So here we are. What do I do for Lockheed Martin? So I do have a background in, aeronautics and aviation, and I did grab a pilot's license in my undergrad, but I currently do a lot of business development. And what that means in the aerospace and defense industry is I win new business and advocate for the current business that we have. So there's the government procures their systems, their satellite systems and services by issuing RFPs. I'm the person who orients the company resources to respond to that. So it involves a lot of interaction with finance and engineering and product management and facilities and things like that to make sure that we provide the best solutions we can to the customer and to the warfighter. And there's a little bit of competitive positioning there too. So, we can beat out some of our rivals and make sure we win, but it's all in the service of the customer. So why does it matter that we try and win work and execute on space programs? So you see that bottom box there on the chart, space missions. Space is important for a lot more reasons than just going up to look at the stars. It includes things like surveillance and navigation. So when you're using Apple Maps or something like that, it's using a GPS signal. Lockheed Martin provides most of the GPS satellites out there. It includes global communications. So if you have DirecTV or a satellite phone that's supported through space, obviously you have human space flight, so we can make our way to Mars and beyond in the near future. It includes strategic and defensive systems. That's a bit of my specialty in terms of supporting our national security. And strategic and operational command and control systems, also another element of national security. But the point I want to make here is, our world depends on space, and it depends on how well we use space, how well we develop technologies in space, and space holds a lot of the secrets in terms of what we can unlock, and explore throughout the universe. So to me, space is important for all of those reasons. We can hop to the next chart. So techniques and skills that kind of got me to where I am. So Skylar was very nice to give a good background, but one of the themes I wanted to drag out here is diversity comes from more than just you expect, right? We all know, the general definition of diversity and why that's important, but I want to take it one level deeper. We have a lot of engineers on the phone, and good on y'all, because I would struggle to do a traditional engineering degree. But, for those of you who aren't the computer science and electrical and civil engineers, don't get me wrong, we need you in space too. Reason being because we need folks who are great at problem solving, and engineers are excellent at problem solving, but so are a lot of other majors and disciplines as well. And in space, there's a lot of problems to solve. One area I really want to focus on is reading and writing. Everyone does a lot of it, but particularly in aerospace and in business development, you read a lot. You read a lot of technical documents, you read a lot of contracts, and you read a lot of proposals and put those proposals together with the writing element. And you have to make sure you can communicate as efficiently as you can especially when you can't see someone face to face like we're working with these days. Teamwork is obviously important for any role you take, but specifically in business development, like I mentioned, you talk to finance, you talk to product, you talk to facilities, you talk to HR in terms of staffing up for a new production line. Say you win a new contract and you need to hire 60 new engineers to design the satellite that you're going to build. You have to get everyone on the same page, and usually in pretty tight timelines. So teamwork is absolutely critical. Just as critical as Excel and PowerPoint. I know it's all, everyone's favorite applications, but you will spend a good amount of time with Excel and PowerPoint in most jobs probably, but especially in business development strategy. So, you don't have to go as far as to, doing macros equations, but, a pivot table certainly won't hurt. And the biggest one of the group, I'll say, is listening. So the most important part of my job is listening to the customer, whether that's NASA or Space Force or whoever else. You've got to make sure that you're providing the solutions that they need and the solutions that their end customers need as well. So sometimes it's listening one step farther than the person who's sitting across from you at the table. There's a couple of classes down there I mentioned. So that goes back into the diversity comes from more than you'll expect. Obviously, I have a background in aerodynamics and aircraft performance, technical aptitude, but I do have a little bit of a diversity in terms of the technical aspects I bring to the table in terms of flying in my minor in air traffic control. And I did spend about 1 year doing an air traffic control type job. So that helped me become more decisive and making decisions with imperfect information. And that's a skill set that will serve you well in any career that you decide to pursue. The other 2 bullets down there emphasizing the soft skills as well. You can design the best satellite on the planet, but at the same time, you have to make sure that it does what you need it to do. And you have to make sure you get all of the stakeholders needed to support that satellite. You don't just build it and launch it. You have to maintain it. You have to support it. You have to market it. You have to sell what it can do to various stakeholders and tell them why they should care about your satellite. So organizational behavior, speech, and even economics in a way that you can, articulate, especially in an industry like this one that's rapidly changing, where you think the future is going to be and what the future business cases look like. Next chart, please. So outcomes and impact. I've danced around this one in the past couple charts, but space is important, not just for the reasons I said for the first box on the call out, but I'll say I grew up on the East Coast before moving out here to the Bay. My family has a career in the military and background, and my dad was actually in the Pentagon the morning of 9/11. So the work I do to support our national security is incredibly personal to me. And if there's anything I can do to prevent something like that happening again, I'm going to jump at the opportunity, and this is my chance to do that. But it's not just, my personal elements of national security and all of that. Space overall has a huge benefit for our state, our nation, and our planet. You see communication and the financial elements there. I covered a bit of this before, but a lot of the ATMs use timing to make sure that they function properly, and a lot of bank transactions work that way as well. Space supports that. So, if anything were to happen to some of those satellites, we might have problems, in the financial industry even, and you see the cascading effects that might come from that. Human exploration and discovery. So during the space race, during the 60s, we got a lot of technological innovation in a very short amount of time. Everything from super performing computers, all the way to the sticky note. A lot of that came from the space race, and we use all of those things today. Technology, maturation, and development, same thing. Over the years, we launched the Apollo with computer power that's less than what we have in our phones. We're continuing to advance that, and you can imagine the things that NASA's working with now. And democratizing technology. And here I'll give a bit of a shout out to our larger industry partners. You see the OneWebs and the Starlinks of the world bringing the internet to the far corners of the world. If we can connect more people on the internet, it generally just makes the world a better place. But on the right side of that chart, I wanted to point out the Hubble Space Telescope. For those of you who aren't familiar, it was actually built here in Sunnyvale. And the little blue box there in the bottom, some of the benefits at all levels, specifically for California and the Bay Area. We all know Steve Wozniak and how he founded Apple in a garage with Steve Jobs. Well, lo and behold, Steve Wozniak's dad was a Lockheed Martin Sunnyvale employee. So sometimes we like to make the joke that Apple kind of started with Lockheed seed capital in a sense. But you see how it works out through the nation, through our allies, and through the world in terms of how space makes the world a better spot. But next and final chart, please. So where does D, E, I, and B come into this? And what does it mean to me? It means better space. And that's not, just the usual definitions that we usually go for, but it also includes that skill diversity that I mentioned before. And at some point, I'd love to, if we get to the tipping point for not hidden figures, right? We have a lot of representation within this industry, but we still have a ways to go. And the more folks we get into it, the more underrepresented groups, the more people with differing abilities and different backgrounds, the more innovative we're going to be, the better we'll be able to solve the problems for our customers. And it makes the industry more, inclusive. It makes those in it feel more attached and feel like they belong in this industry versus being, outside group. And, one thing I like to make a point is to continue to bring more folks into the industry. So the more folks we have in the industry, the more we have the ability to get more folks into the industry. And, Lockheed Martin does a great job at college recruiting fairs. I've personally been for a different company to BEA, and I've always enjoyed that experience and seeing the energy and enthusiasm from the students looking for their first job or their first internship. So overall, DEI and B is important to me because it makes space better and it makes the world safer, better connected, and more efficient for everyone. So that does it for my charts.
All right, thank you very much. Skylar is gonna go ahead and ask a question, but I don't know what that B means. Does that mean Black people? Or what is the B at the end of DEI?
Sure. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But like I said, the more folks we can get into space, the better off we'll be.
All right, Skylar, please go ahead.
Yes, so I wanted to ask, how do you qualify new opportunities in the space exploration domain?
That's an excellent question. So I'll mention that I don't personally cover the space exploration areas. I'm more in national security, but the process is very similar. The government tends to put out things called RFIs, requests for information, and industry will respond, large businesses and small, academia like JPL and some of the other colleges and universities out there. And they take that feedback, the government, and that informs their procurement strategy. From there, they refine an RFP, request for proposal, and that incorporates all of the feedback, all of the engagements they've had with industry, academia, and things like that up to that point. And that's where they actually line out what they're looking to buy. This is the satellite bus. These are the payloads we're looking to put on it. This is the mission it must support. This is the longevity that we're looking for, and this is the price point. And that's where people like me engage folks on the company side to start pulling together the engineers and the software folks and the facilities folks to see how we can do that, make it fit within the parameters, and get it done, to a high level of functionality. So it's a very fast-paced and generally very busy role, but it's immensely rewarding. But that's a great question. Thank you for it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Skylar and John. We really enjoyed that talk. Next up, I'm going to introduce Naila to introduce Joan. Naila Payne is one of our SGSU students that just came in. So Naila, please go ahead.
Thank you. It is my honor to introduce our next speaker, Joan Surma. She is a partner support engineer at Zoom. She has worked at Google as a sales engineer, and she's contributed to transforming mobile marketing as a support engineer at the company branch. Additionally, she has been an inspiration to both adults and children as an instructor at Facebook, San Jose State University, and academies of math and science. She earned her Bachelor's of Science degree from San Jose State and is a BASE and NSBE alumni. So please welcome Joan Surma.
Thank you. I'm just sitting here. How am I supposed to follow Joan. So thank you for that introduction. Yes, my name is Joan. And Nyala, I think one thing that I just want to shout out and mention is that I worked with the J. Pinson STEM education program with Dr. Virginia, and a huge shout out. And I think, you know, a huge part of where I am today is largely to do with Dr. Virginia and just being in that program. And also thank you to Darren and Rakita for reaching out for this opportunity. So yes, today I'm just gonna, you know, add to what everybody else has brought up before, just kind of finding a way to bring your own seat to the table when we're thinking about DEI and thinking about how just seeing yourself in a position where, you know, you're not always represented and you're not seeing your face all the time. So one of my favorite quotes that I always bring up is from Charlie Chisholm, where it says, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And so that's a huge part of my belief of just the idea of who you can be and how you can show up in the spaces that we are in, especially again, not seeing that diversity necessarily the way that we want to see it quite yet. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So currently my role is partner support engineer at Zoom. I just recently left Google. So I'm working, you know, this is good timing because a huge part of what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks is really figuring out what I'm going to be doing in this role. And the large part of this role is being an advocate for our developer community and supporting them when it comes to integrating Zoom APIs and specifically SDKs. And so when we think about Zoom, especially in the last year, when we're using Zoom constantly and all the time, this is something that we want to try to innovate and go beyond just it being a video platform. And so there are a lot of applications that Zoom especially for our developers. And we want to get the developers involved when it comes to actually integrating Zoom into the platform. And so this is anywhere, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, but anywhere from healthcare to education to gaming, and how the SDK platform can actually really show up and have developers be the ones really creating this platform. So having it as an open source in a way where you see this Zoom SDK as an opportunity for you to build out to be something more than just it being a video platform, a chatting platform, or you know, a conferencing platform. So one of the other things too that I have the opportunity to do is work with the CTO of Zoom, Brandon Nidelson, in innovating and coming up with ideas and solutions of how this is actually going to look like real life. And within that is working with our product and engineering team to brainstorm what that in the long run is going to look like. So we have the mentality of putting customers first. And so with customers being first, when they come back and say, all right, Zoom is great, but I'm a principal at this school and this feature is really not working out for us because our teachers aren't able to go into the individual rooms to see what the students are doing. That comes back to us and we start working on that and see what that looks like and create a roadmap for that. Go ahead to the next slide. So the skills needed specifically for this role, communication, and I'll steal what John was saying about listening. That is key because we're working with customers and we're listening to the problems that they're having and we're creating solutions for them. And that's what I was doing too at Google, where as a solutions sales engineer, you listen to problems. What can we do? How can we build it out for you? And then the technical skills comes after that. One question that I always ask, especially when I was going through the interview process for roles that are customer facing, is the technical aptitude or the technical skill more important than the communication skill or being able to be a people person, you know? And honestly, I think technical skills can be learned, but it's really important to understand what your customer issue is. If you are unable to put yourself in the customer's shoes and listen to what their actual need is, you will be unable to solve that issue. And so I think the cool opportunity that I have is I don't necessarily go in and code the solution, not for this role, but I do get the opportunity to talk to customers and say, okay, this is how the solution would look like. And because you have developers, I can use my technical knowledge to be able to guide them through that without necessarily being the one building it out. But I think communication is largely to do with creating a solution for these customers. All right, next slide. So just thinking about the outcome for this particular role, I think I have the opportunity to work and innovate outside the current box. Like I mentioned, working with Zoom, we think about our conferencing, everyone's working from home, a lot of students are home, and now we're going back into the office. There's a lot of hybrid situations. What does that look like? And how do we actually think outside of that? There are a lot of competitors now who can create exactly what Zoom is. It's not necessarily the most difficult product to create, but how do we keep our customers and how do we continue to create solutions? And so getting a different perspective of what that can actually look like based on the customer needs and the use cases that we see. And so within that, we get impacts in industries such as healthcare, government, and education. And an example really that I recently heard of how this is actually being used for our video SDK is in healthcare, how ultrasounds are being used in real time for doctors to be able to use these ultrasounds, but be able to share the ultrasounds across the board with other people who are also looking at this ultrasound without being in the room. And so this is a use case that's not necessarily something that would have popped in our head without the customers really saying, oh, this is a need that we have. So again, this is an opportunity to listen to the needs and figure out how we can create those impacts and solutions. And then next slide. So I think when it comes to DEI and for me seeing myself and how I can create an impact within Zoom is creating opportunities for women of color, for Black women specifically, to really come in and not only gain a position, but also have a position where we're seeing in the C-suites, our managers. So, individual contributors are great, but I think one thing that when we think about diversity and inclusion, how does that actually look like visually? How does that look like in our org charts? Like, is that our interns and then we don't see them returning? Is that mean we go to Afrotech, we hire for a 3-month contract and we don't see them? Or is this someone who's working their way up to be director of XYZ, right? And then having these discussions with colleagues, specifically just thinking about how, like I mentioned that quote, bring your folding chair. People, we can assume that DEI is obviously something that we're talking about all the time, but I think the understanding is not necessarily there, especially when you're not the one being impacted by it. And so having this conversation openly, and one place that I think that we can do that and is in ERGs, employer resource groups. And so at Zoom, there's one called Zoom Soul, which is for allies and for the Black employees to be able to have these conversations and have discussions. And then the other thing is attend conferences and really being verbal about what the goal of Zoom is. One word that I like is rather than culture fit, thinking about culture add. And so culture fit itself, the word can actually be a little bit discriminatory because if you don't fit this picture that, let's say, Zoom has of what their culture is, then in itself, it's kind of pushing people out. So having the ability to add to the culture, I think, and having that open mind and really being able to see this in places where we don't hire from traditional backgrounds. So ensuring that DEI is also a verb and we're putting action into it. Next slide. So I think I've summed it up. When we think about DEI, diversity can be a numbers game. So thinking about inclusion being the impact, and then equity being the effort that promotes diversity and equity and inclusion, because without that, I don't think it's sustainable. So really understanding what those words mean and how we can actually, show up, and how for me being at Zoom, I can really ensure that I also create that room for new folks to join the team. That's it.
Thank you very much for that inspiring speech. Please go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, so my question is, how do you navigate switching companies?
How do I navigate switching companies? That's an interesting question. And I had this conversation recently with someone who also joined Zoom, but they had been in the company for 25 years. I was at Google for a little bit over a year. And prior to that, I worked more in the educational and nonprofit spaces. And so I think I found a way to create up my own path. And in every single step where I've gone and where I plan on being, I think I take a lot from my previous experiences and really know that I bring a lot to the table. And so ensuring that you go in with a confidence and know that you know what you are talking about, but also being open to learning. There's a lot that I have to learn, especially in the coming months, in the coming years. And I'm open to it. And so surrounding myself with people and creating a tribe in each company that I go to make sure that I continue to learn.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Truly appreciate your insights. That's fantastic. And it's also showing the impact of the work of Dr. Virginia at SJSU that you're giving her credit for your advancement. So, I mean, that's always lovely to hear. And I hope you guys also connect, all you SJSU alum, because I don't even know if you knew each other when you were here.
Yes.
Next up, we have Khalil. I mean, Khalil is a fixture at SJSU. Unfortunately, Ose is not here, so I'll just briefly introduce him. But he got his degree from SJSU. He has had extensive experience leading and mentoring interns to the point that, you know, I look at it, I mean, and you look at his resume, he's meant, I don't know how many it is now, but a large number of students. He's had a huge impact on them and their career trajectory. So he's perfect in terms of letting students know how to transition to industry, and he's going to give the talk himself. So please go ahead, Khalil, you can introduce yourself and delve into the talk.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for that intro. That was beautiful. And I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, so maybe we can get multiple questions in. Next slide. Yeah, so I'm Khalil Stell. I'm a software engineer at Google. To be more specific, I'm actually really a firmware engineer, and I'm a little closer to a hardware engineer. Next slide. Yeah, so I actually work on Wear OS, the smartwatch operating system. I'm actually wearing one right now. This is the Galaxy Watch 4. It came out, I think, a couple weeks ago, about a month ago. I kind of knew about it way before that. So the time exactly when it came out to the public is a little shaky in my head. But yeah, we basically take Android and we kind of shrink it down to the size that it can fit on a smartwatch. And personally, I've actually worked on the hardware architecture for different platforms, the embedded software, the bootloader, which was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do on this project, the Linux kernel modules, and then Linux Android integration. Wear OS pretty much helps to accelerate the adoption of smartwatches in the world by allowing industry partners to basically use smartwatches for their own company, rather than having, you know, LG or whatever other company like Fossil and such build their own operating systems and have their own separate ecosystems. We provide them with a solution that they can just throw on to whatever hardware they're using in order to get it up and brought up so they can actually, you know, have a cohesive environment. It's the same reason why other companies like Motorola and LG and such will use Android for their systems. Also want to kind of note the fact that, or before I get to that note, I also want to say that, you know, as for the users as well, I actually love wearing these watches. I think the impact on people is that having data is such an important thing when it comes to your fitness. Like there's notifications, there's calendars, there's getting the weather. These are like little nice things so I can just keep my phone somewhere else and not have to think about it. But honestly, the thing I like about these devices is that like they have a whole bunch of health metrics, and knowing, you know, how hard I walked, or like, you know, how hard I walked or ran or biked or hiked or whatever. I do those things quite often. These are really exciting. Getting that data back really inspires me to want to continue doing these things. So it helps me build a habit. Also, a little note, I've also worked on Daydream, the VR team, rest in peace, they are gone. And I've also worked at Google Assistant as well. So what skills did I use to accomplish this? I'm just gonna go straight down the line. C++, Python, a whole bunch of the programming languages. I had one student ask me, how many languages should I know? I was like, whatever's required. These are a good start. Embedded systems fundamentals, software and hardware architecture, schematic design and review, things that you'll pretty much learn as a computer engineer if you are a computer engineer, or even an EE, in some parts if you're a software engineer. Automated software and testing, and the rest are like, you know, very specific. Like I work on audio, haptics and display and bootloader and a lot of other areas when it comes to developing embedded platforms. So for the most part, those are kind of the areas that I use to accomplish my work. There's also another area that's going to bring in there, which is like, the soft skills, being able to negotiate, being able to persuade other people that my solutions are really good ones, or, just be able to communicate with other engineers is highly required. Next slide. So what have I done? What's my impact? I'll say that out of everyone here, I believe I'm one of the youngest people here, so I haven't had as much impact as everyone else has had. But I also want to say that, like, if I there's a pessimistic way to look at this and there's a proactive way to look at this. One of them is that, like, I've done a lot of work, but y'all probably haven't seen it. Like, for example, Stadia. I actually contributed to that project at one point directly and then at one point indirectly. One of the systems that I wrote that was supposed to help reduce the size of the binary ended up kind of getting involved into what is now in Stadia. I'm kind of proud to say that I was part of that, as well as work that's been done on Assistant, as well as the work that's been done on Wear OS. And I can't really talk about any of those details because it's all proprietary. But I also want to say that, like, I worked on many projects that you'll never see the daylight, but I also say that a lot of my other impact has come from things I've done outside of Google. As our professor just said, I've helped out with students. I've taught certain labs and classes. I've done a lot of mentorship. I've pulled quite a few people from SEE, the Software and Computer Engineering Society, into Google, and other people who were outside of Google as well into Google as well, outside of SASU or out of SE. Sorry, I got a little mixed up. But I believe that all the work I've done in open source and outside of Google has had extreme impact. Probably even, I would even say, more than the thing that gets me paid every single week or every single other week. So yeah, that's kind of my little impact on what I've been doing. Just want to make sure everyone understands that you can do more than simply just what your work has indicated for you. That's not the end all be all. Next slide. So what's next for me? So this is where my slide gets a little bit weird, because I'm actually going to try to see if I can get into materials engineering for a PhD. I'm actually going to be applying quite soon. Now, first off, I want to make sure everyone understands this, that choosing computer engineering was not a mistake. I absolutely love computer engineering. It's so fun to me. Programming, building robots, working on consumer products, that stuff is absolutely just some of the funnest things I get to work on. But for me, there's something in particular that I want to discover, that I need to discover. And maybe if you guys keep up with me, you guys will be able to see the progress on that. Someone who's going to switch from one other side of engineering to a very different side of engineering. And I feel like it's worth the risk, or that's not the risk, worth the time for me to do it, because I feel like I'd regret otherwise. But also, don't think that I'm going to stop computer engineering. I will always be working with students, always be working on robotics, I'll always be working on my open source projects. So it's not like I'm going to lose those skills in the future. So that's kind of what's up for me coming up very soon. And last slide. What does diversity and equity and inclusion mean to me? So I'm going to tell you guys what Google kind of defines it as. Google defines it as, it's actually kind of twofold. There's one for the consumer and then one for us internally. For the consumers, making sure that no one feels like they're left behind when it comes to the products we build. It shouldn't matter that my skin tone is darker when it comes to wearing these smartwatches. One of the biggest things we do tests on, and I'm actually helping out with the tests quite often, is making sure that the heart rate sensor can penetrate through dark skin and actually get a reading. These kind of things that if you aren't thinking about it, like you might have an entirely only a set of lighter skinned individuals doing the testing and say, oh, our testing's fantastic. But in reality, your testing is missing out on an entire category of people, India, people from Southern Asia, Africans, so people of African descent. So that's one thing. On the other side, it also goes into making sure that we feel that we do not, that we not just try to be, it's not like color blindness at Google, but it's more about making sure that we appreciate the diversity of people's opinions, where they come from, and making sure that we make sure they listen to everyone. I was literally just having a conversation with one of my friends who's a Latina, a female, younger engineer in Google X, or in Alphabet X. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that in those type of environments that she is always listened to, and if she's not being listened to, this is something that Google takes very seriously. Now, when it comes to me, I'm going to be a little selfish on this. When it comes to what I believe, what I really want to see out in tech, it's honestly to see a lot of you guys in these places. I'll be frank. When it comes to the computer engineering department, my generation, there were 2 Black people, 3. The other person I didn't talk to very often. I don't know where he really was. He never was really around. But me and Onyema, that was pretty much it. And then if I looked at the other generations, there really weren't that many other Black people. And I don't really remember seeing, I remember seeing 2 Black females in computer engineering. That's pretty much as far as my knowledge has gone. I've been around here for about like 8-9 years. I want to see more of us in these places because we should be here as much as anyone else. So yeah, that's pretty much my talk. Any questions?
Thank you so much for that. You balancing service and your work is, I mean, that's just a phenomenal feat. You know, we wonder how you do that. But I think the most pertinent question is, what are the best ways for SJSU students to network into your field? Because you seem to kind of know this more than anybody would. So please, could you expand on that?
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one, especially if you guys are really new to SJSU, do extracurricular projects. That is massive. Talking to, like, being able to work on like extracurricular projects where it's usually a group or team project, that is massive. The types of people you meet, my roommates have all been people from the robotics team, people that I've worked with on the robotics team. The people I have lunch and dinners and go party with or go to the Bahamas or go on vacations, they're all not entirely robotics people, but the majority of them are, is because of that bond that we made. And I actually remember talking to someone else about this, and they kind of clarified to me, it's like, not just like, you know, networking isn't just simply handshaking and say, I know you, you're a person, that's it. No, it's building those relationships with those other people. But also on top of this too, remember, like, it's just one part is the extracurriculars. Another part is the effect that you make when you're in your classes and you work on a project. Because I swear to you, when you ghost someone, when you do poor work on group projects, when there's any sort of behavior that you have during classes, people remember to a scary degree. I still remember people that if they apply to Google, I'll be like, I will say, no, we should not hire this person because they're not very googly, not nice people. They're rude and they're sexist, or I've met these individuals. And there have been times when I've actually just said no. I want to, like, on the email say, hey, you know this person, right? Would you bring them in? And I was like, no, don't even give them an interview. That sounds kind of cold, but it's the impact that they gave on me that I wouldn't want to work anywhere near them. And I don't think anyone else would want to either. So it really just comes down to building those relationships with the people around you, finding people who you believe you can help bring you up as well as you can bring them up. Find people that you guys can work closely together. And yes, very much. Oh, and lastly, do internships every single year, every single summer you possibly can. Get internships. That will also help you expand your network beyond SJSU and beyond your current set of people in your cohort for that year. That's it.
So thank you so much, Khalil, for all you do. I appreciate it. Next up, we're going to introduce Casey McKenna. Casey is the treasurer for BASE, and Casey will be introducing Jonathan Dixon. So Casey, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Eros. So allow me to introduce Jonathan Dixon. Jonathan is a site reliability engineer working at Cisco here in San Jose. He graduated through a 3-2 program in engineering, studying at St. Mary's College and San Jose State University. He started at Cisco in 2017, I believe, as an intern before becoming full-time in 2020. And I'm very excited to listen to what he has to say. So, Jonathan, it's all you.
Cool. Thank you for that introduction. And once again, just thank you everyone for having me here. It's very honored to have this opportunity to speak. I think I missed the mark on putting a theme, but if I could do it again, I would say it'd be creating your own path. I can go to the next slide, please. So what do I do, or what am I working on? Why is it necessary? So I work specifically in Cisco's IT within network services, and essentially, if you want to boil down what we do, is we support all of Cisco's network infrastructure. And so we're a global company. So there's people in San Jose, North Carolina, Australia, India, London, all over the place. And so providing support for infrastructure that big is a really, really large task to do manually. And that's part of my job as SRE, is to support and create automation. Specifically, the technology I focus on is our SD-WAN. So I do a lot of developing for automation in regards to deploying or converting our sites to SD-WAN, as well as using a monitoring tools, or if we don't have a tool to monitor, then we have to create our own. And that's basically the gist of what we do around keeping up Cisco's network infrastructure, keeping it up and running on the latest and greatest technology that we have. And I guess that's the fun part of my job is if there's something, if there's an issue or is there a task that I see that's manual, like you really have the freedom to be that front runner to develop a solution for it. Okay, next slide, please. So what skills and techniques I use? The biggest skill I would say is integration of tools. I just listed out a lot of the tools that we use, but yeah, we have a lot of monitoring tools and systems that we have, and we have to integrate it with the other automation that we use, or whether it's another monitoring tool or system that we have. So there's a lot of work around that. But also on the operations side, there's a lot of network troubleshooting. So having that base knowledge of network infrastructure, like what is a router, what is a switch, and things like that, and having the ability to be able to see, identify, and attempt to resolve potential issues. Because when it comes to networking, you're going to see a new issue every single time you get a case. So having that ability to break down and troubleshoot is really key. And there's also a lot of soft skills that you have. I mean, as an engineer, you'd be surprised how many soft skills you would actually have to develop, especially when it comes to communicating with engineers or customers, especially around engineers, because there's been a lot of times where you might have a priority and it's depending on another team's work, but your priorities might not align. So having that ability to navigate issues like that is pretty key, as well as knowing how to present your work and showing management or directors and things like that, that the value that it has behind it. Okay, next slide, please. So what are the outcomes and the impacts of my field? Say the biggest one is improving operational excellence through the automation that we use. So with monitoring tools that we develop, we have the ability to identify issues quicker, or even potentially identify them before they happen. So that leads to faster response times for us, for our network engineers, and things such as that. And also utilizing our software-defined network platforms. We have SD-WAN and DNA Center are our biggest ones. And those provide advanced capabilities that we didn't have. And it reduces manual tasks by an immense amount of time. For example, say a few years ago, if you had to upgrade a site and its networking hardware to say like 20 to 30 devices, it would take a team of engineers in probably an entire weekend. But with these platforms that we have now, you can do that with one engineer within a few hours. So the amount of time we save with the automation and the platforms we have, it's immense. And this is something that we get to use along with our customers. So I think it has a pretty big impact. So what are my next steps? I would say continuing to learn. As always, outside of university, after you graduate, you're still always going to have to learn. Earning my certification. So one that I'm currently working on right now is the CCNP, which is a Cisco networking professional. Also, just taking on a new challenge after my 2-year mark. So I want to be able to transition to learning a new technology and working on something new, because being adaptable is important to me. And then last slide. So what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to me? To boil it down, I would say creating opportunity. When you think it was Brian who mentioned it, where it was like less than 8% of people in tech are Black, and a big cause of that is the lack of opportunity. And not just in regards to jobs or internships, but really starting early in that field, like being able to introduce youth to STEM and being able to get those early introductions to help learn about it. Because I know when I started my career in college, it was a long time before I met a Black engineer. And just having that ability to see someone like you, it goes a long way. And that's why I'm really passionate about that, just being plugged into the community, being able to give back, and being able to show that there's people like us that can do what we do. And events like this are a big part of that.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Casey has a question for you.
Yeah, so I guess my question would be like more to your time at Cisco. So how did you like translate your internship experience at Cisco into like a full-time job? Because I know a lot of students like to potentially get an internship at a place that they would like to work at somewhere down the line. So what was your experience for that?
I would say the biggest thing that helped me was showing my ability to learn, because I came from an electrical engineering background. And when I interned there, it was a more software oriented position, but I had a really great mentor to help me navigate that, and as well as learn as I went along with my projects. And I think that ability to show that I was able to learn throughout my actual internship and be able to produce the project that I had showed my team and my manager that I have the ability to be adaptable and continue to grow. So you may not know the skills or the technology at the moment of your internship, but being able to learn on the go will go a long way of proving your abilities, I would say.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, Jonathan. Next up, I'm going to introduce Brendan. Brendan Manigo is one of our SJSU students. Brendan, just like the presenter, is a student athlete. He was on the football team and he's doing biomedical engineering. I always find that fascinating and challenging. So Brendan, please go ahead and introduce Jalen.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Jalen Dinwiddie, a recent graduate from San Jose State University, where he got his bachelor's in computer science, and also played on the San Jose State football team all 4 years he was attending college. He was recently a system engineer at Lockheed Martin, but he now was moved on from that and is now a full-time software developer at IBM. So please just welcome Jalen Dinwiddie.
Thanks for the awesome intro, Brendan. You're my guy, man. You know that. But also, thank you, Fullerman and Base, for giving me the opportunity to connect with my alma mater and speak with you all today. But yeah, I'm Jalen Dinwiddie, current software developer at IBM, and the theme of this presentation will be Climb the Mountain. It's actually a phrase that was coined by our old head coach, Coach Brennan. Awesome dude. But anyway, if we just move on to the next slide, and I'll just tell you a little bit about me real quick. I'm 22 from Stockton, California, just graduated last semester with my bachelor's in computer science. And yes, I played football, as you can see on the right. And that's actually my team on the bottom left at IBM. Awesome guys. But if we could also move on to the next slide. So IBM, if you don't know, stands for International Business Machines. And what we do is basically provide platforms, products, and services to companies to enhance their own personal business development and growth, which includes increased cyber resiliency, security, data analysis, and just better performance overall. And we specialize in cloud and cognitive software. And another big service that we provide is ZOS, which stands for Z Series Operating System, aka the mainframe operating system. And what its purpose is to support the multiprocessing of programs and applications securely, reliably, and quickly making development and user experience more efficient by utilizing virtual storage. And it's actually used by 44 of the top 50 banks and all top 10 insurers worldwide, as well as a large number of government, healthcare, airline, and some other retail organizations that require the highest standards of performance, security, reliability, and availability. And I'm actually in the ZOS program. I'm specifically on the build infrastructure team, which is responsible for developing internal tools and applications to support the services that ZOS provides for our customers. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I won't really give you all that technical jargon, but from what I've noticed, as far as tools for success, being fresh out of college and not having much experience in industry, I've realized that these skills are very critical to making a move in the tech world. And, first and foremost, you have to have a passion for learning. That goes without saying with this ever advancing world, rapidly advancing with STEM. You just have to be able to remain in the loop, stay competitive, and put your best foot forward. And as far as communication, it's always better to over communicate than to under communicate, because you want to never assume or leave any room for error. You want to be able to ask questions. That's also very critical. And, sometimes I feel like a dummy because I'm asking so many questions, but it's all to better understand, your objective, what's going on, and it helps with the learning process. And if you ever do happen to make a mistake, you have to be able to own it and make, just take ownership for it and not make excuses or blame anyone else. And honestly, being a student athlete through football, you learn that on the field, but then I'm realizing how important that is actually in industry and just the world in general. But yeah, that's that. And as far as networking, it's not just about, well, can we go back real quick? Sorry. Yeah. For networking, it's you've probably heard, it's not always about what you know, it's about who you know. And honestly, I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for the connections I've made, especially through the Beyond Football program coordinated by Tobrick Blaine and other people who have taken the role of mentorship. That is very huge in getting to where you want to go. And also Google, being in STEM, being in tech, you want to be able to know everything you can, and Google will literally be your best friend. Whenever you have a problem, just, open up a browser, type something in, and boom, there you go. But next slide, please. So yeah, here now we'll move on to the next steps. I kind of listed some personal goals that I have to position myself in a place where I can be where I want to be at the top of the mountain, and then from there be able to help people climb up the mountain. So that involves getting a couple more years of software development under my belt, and then get an MBA. I don't know where that'll be, but I'd love to have that so then I can enter some leadership roles within, like being a product manager or being an executive, and then eventually starting my own business one day, and whatever that would be. But again, this is all to reach my end goal being, help everybody I can and close the gap. Because as you know, being a person of color in, this day and age in this tech field, there's a huge gap, and there's a lot of underrepresentation with our people. So we need to do what we can to help each other as a community. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion, the definitions are very straightforward and they're relatively defined here. And it should be expected in society and in industry, but in reality, it's what we're lacking. And as I and other panelists have said earlier, if we consider the statistics and demographics, it doesn't look too good for us. But honestly, as a former athlete, being in a team-oriented sport, I've realized how important it is that we do include that to, again, climb the mountain, get to the mountaintop. And this is one of the things that I love about IBM, as they are very passionate about this and are actively practicing. In fact, we're I believe we're in the top 5% of companies in the diversity and inclusion rating. So it's, as far as I believe it was Jonathan and Khalil who mentioned that, in school, we saw very few people who look like us in our classes and everything. So we got to do what we can to, as a community, help each other out and better represent ourselves in this field. And what I've kind of realized is that, yes, there can be differences between us, but we should be able to acknowledge that we are different, but eliminate the difference, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. But if we could go to our next slide, it's a little bit more of an illustration. And if we do achieve all three, it's kind of like illustrated as a ring on that one above inclusion. And it's a symbol of an unbreakable team, which is required if we want to excel, achieve our goals, and climb the mountain. But I guess I'll just wrap it up with that. And that's how I feel about that. If you want to, just talk more about that, I'm more than happy to. And once again,
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jalen. Truly appreciate it. Appreciate you coming out. Appreciate you giving this talk. Brendan has one question for you.
Yes, Jalen, how do you find the balance between all the activities you engage in?
Good question. Honestly, it's all about time management and being able to make sacrifices, and having a great support system with you, because mentally it could be very draining. But if you have the right people around you, people to lean on, it helps a lot.
All right, thank you very much for everyone. We are at time. It is 6:31. If you want to connect with any of the people, you can reach out to them on LinkedIn. Once again, a big round of applause, virtual or however you want to do it in person, for Deborah Turnage, Brian Spence, John Adams, Joan Surma, Khalil Estelle, Jonathan Dixon, Jalen Dinwiddie, and our organizers from BASE, the Black Alliance of Science and Engineers, people like Skyla, the people that introduced the speakers, Darius Thomas, Takwa Bajawi, Daniel Tripp, Skyla Dennis, Naila Payne, Casey Ikema, Brendan Manigo. Thank you all. It's been a fantastic time and we truly appreciate you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And please complete the following survey if you haven't on the